Breaking news that changes everything. Trump's mask has finally fallen, and what's underneath is more disturbing than anyone expected. The man once praised as Russia's potential ally has transformed into something far more dangerous, a wounded ego with nuclear codes. Listen carefully. What's happening now isn't just another political game. It's a desperate move by a failed peacemaker turning into an economic terrorist. The proposed 500% oil tariffs aren't just numbers. They're a declaration of total economic warfare. But here's what they're not telling you. While Washington roars about crushing sanctions, something unprecedented is happening in the global markets. China and India aren't just buying Russian oil, they're creating an entirely new economic system, one that makes American sanctions look like yesterday's news. But here's the real shock. The U.S. energy grid runs on Russian uranium. Over 20% of American nuclear plants depend on Russian fuel. Think about that for a moment. They're threatening to sanction their own power supply. The level of self-destruction is almost unbelievable. The most disturbing part? This isn't about foreign policy anymore. This is about a man who promised peace in 24 hours and failed. Now he's willing to risk America's economic stability just to save face. The signs are everywhere. Inflation climbing, credit costs soaring, budget programs getting slashed. And while official channels stay silent, our sources reveal a terrifying pattern. Every new sanction package isn't weakening Russia. It's strengthening it. The country they wanted to isolate is building something new, something self-sufficient. While America's allies are secretly buying Russian goods through third countries, afraid to admit their own desperation. But here's what should really keep you up at night. This isn't just about oil or uranium anymore. This is about the complete transformation of global power. And while politicians play their games, average Americans are about to pay the price at the pump, literally. Write in the comments if you're already seeing fuel prices climb in your area. We need to track how far this crisis has spread. Because what's coming next? Well, that's what we need to talk about. The details I'm about to share will explain why this isn't just another political crisis. This is the beginning of something much bigger. But let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture. What we're witnessing isn't just about sanctions. It's about a fundamental shift in how global power operates. Trump's approach to foreign policy has exposed a critical weakness in the Western system: the volatility of personal diplomacy versus institutional stability. Think about it. When one person can overturn billions in economic measures on a whim, what does that tell the world? Markets hate uncertainty, yet that's exactly what we're getting. Major investors are already redirecting their capital flows, seeking stability in alternative markets. The Chinese yuan is gaining ground. The BRICS nations are accelerating their de-dollarization efforts. Here's what mainstream media won't tell you. This isn't just about Russia anymore. Every major power is watching this display of institutional weakness. When sanctions become a personal bargaining chip rather than a strategic tool, the entire framework of Western economic pressure starts to crumble. We're seeing signs of this already. Traditional U.S. allies are hedging their bets, diversifying their diplomatic and economic partnerships. The Gulf states are increasingly looking east. Even European powers are developing independent strategic capabilities. But here's the real kicker. While Washington is caught up in this political theater, Russia has been systematically building resilience. New payment systems, strengthened domestic production, expanded trade routes. The very pressure meant to constrain Russia has accelerated its adaptation. Look at the numbers. Russian agriculture is booming. Military exports are up. New energy partnerships are being forged across Asia. While the West debates the rules of its own game, others are quietly rewriting the global playbook. And this brings us to a crucial point that most analysts are missing. The real battle isn't about immediate economic impact. It's about long-term strategic positioning. Every time sanctions become a political show rather than a calculated move, the global financial system inches closer to fundamental restructuring. But what happened next would shock even the most seasoned observers. Looking at the shifting sands of American politics, we're witnessing a remarkable transformation in Trump's approach to international relations. What started as a businessman's vision of deal-making has evolved into something more complex and concerning. The former president, once praised for his direct negotiation style, now seems to view diplomacy through the lens of a reality TV show, expecting instant results and constant applause. This isn't just about policy anymore. It's psychological. When Russia doesn't play by his expected script, offering measured responses instead of theatrical gestures, we see frustration build. The silence from Moscow, where calculated diplomacy prevails over dramatic statements, clearly irritates those accustomed to ultimatums and rapid shifts in tone. What's particularly striking is how Trump's current rhetoric aligns with traditional hawk positions, the very establishment he once promised to challenge. His recent statements about sanctions and economic pressure echo the neoconservative playbook of the early 2000s. The same figures who once distanced themselves from Trump now rally behind him, seeing an opportunity to advance their aggressive foreign policy agenda through his popular appeal. The irony shouldn't be lost on anyone. The man who pledged to drain the swamp and end foreign policy adventures is now championing policies straight from the conventional Washington playbook. His discussions about secondary sanctions and economic coercion mirror exactly what the establishment has long advocated. This shift reveals a deeper truth about American politics: the system's remarkable ability to absorb and redirect anti-establishment energy. Those hoping Trump's potential second term might bring isolationism or reduced international pressure may need to reassess. The signs point to something quite different: a continuation, perhaps even intensification, of traditional aggressive policies, just packaged in populist rhetoric. What do you think about this transformation in American foreign policy? Leave your answer in the comments. The new wave of American sanctions policy shows a dramatic shift in approach. Trump's stance has evolved from seeking dialogue to demanding complete control over economic pressure tools. He wants sanctions on demand, but only if he personally approves them. This reflects a deeper philosophy. America should not depend on international institutions, but become the institution itself. The internal U.S. political climate has become surprisingly accepting of these harsh measures. Even former critics of sanctions have fallen silent, perhaps fearing awkward positions if Trump returns to the White House, or because any alternative seems too risky in today's uncertain geopolitical landscape. Trump increasingly sees himself not as an opposition leader, but as the restored master of the political process. His decisions are becoming demonstrative rather than programmatic. This isn't about finding balance between isolation and intervention anymore. It's about a missionary-like confidence in unilateral action. The irony is that this position makes him a convenient tool for those who've long sought to revive the full sanctions machine. American policy has always thrived on internal contradictions. The same person can call NATO obsolete one day and promise to strengthen it the next. Context is everything, and today's context demands toughness. Russia remains unmoved, like a chess player in the fifth hour of play, while the American president appears like a student who failed to retake an exam. Everything was calculated for quick effect: a phone call, loud statement, some political pressure, and Moscow would supposedly surrender. But it didn't happen. American rhetoric has shifted from building dialogue strategy to presenting demands without compromise. Russia must, Moscow has to, Putin needs to understand, while Washington stands firm. Sanctions remain, economic pressure increases, military budgets expand. Any hint at negotiations seems mockery when backed by pages of threats. This failure to reach agreement isn't about principles. It's about one side wanting to dictate rather than negotiate. The proposed talks weren't dialogue, but an attempt to bring Moscow to reason through forced conditions. Do you agree with what's happening? Tell us what you think. Good evening, viewers. Today we're diving deep into the changing dynamics of international politics, particularly focusing on Washington's evolving stance and the transformation of global power relations. The old formula states that politics is the art of the possible. Yet Washington still clings to the belief that impossible demands can be shaped into reality through sanctions and rhetorical pressure. This approach, however, is showing significant wear and tear. The world has changed fundamentally, and the threat of sanctions no longer carries the weight it once did. What we're witnessing is fascinating. Countries under pressure are increasingly choosing to unite rather than capitulate. Washington's crisis resolution playbook, firmly rooted in late 20th century thinking, is becoming obsolete as global players evolve and assert their independence. Russia has emerged as a symbol of this new reality, not as an exception, but as a prime example showing that unilateral approaches have lost their effectiveness. Recent reports indicate that Donald Trump's initial enthusiasm for dialogue with the Russian president has notably cooled. This isn't about a complete breakdown, but rather a shift from perceived importance to futility. The Pentagon's recent action to freeze certain arms supplies has sparked internal Washington disputes, highlighting the fragmentation within the American political system. During the summit in Netherlands, sources noted a marked change in Trump's rhetoric, his usual confidence replaced by frustration when met with measured responses. Russian diplomacy has demonstrated remarkable restraint and calculation, playing a long-term game that contrasts with Trump's preference for quick wins. This methodical approach appears challenging for an administration accustomed to immediate results. The European response has been equally telling, with growing calls for strategic autonomy and alternative dialogue formats. The political landscape is shifting, and while some scramble to predict America's next move, others are already preparing for scenarios where the U.S. is no longer the primary anchor of global politics. What do you think about these changing dynamics? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'm particularly interested in your views on how these shifts might affect international relations going forward. In the complex theater of global politics, we're witnessing a fascinating transformation in U.S.-Russia relations. Trump's initial approach, marked by hopes of quick negotiations, has evolved into something more nuanced and challenging. The Kremlin's response to this shifting dynamic shows remarkable strategic patience and preparation. Moscow anticipated these changes long before they materialized. The return to sanctions wasn't a surprise, but rather an expected phase in the political cycle. What's particularly interesting is the Kremlin's measured response. No panic, no dramatic gestures, just calculated pragmatism. Behind the public rhetoric, communication channels remain open. The Russians understand that Trump's actions are largely driven by domestic political considerations rather than genuine foreign policy strategy. This reality check has led Moscow to adopt a more autonomous approach, not seeking isolation, but rather independence from unreliable partnerships. The situation in the northern Black Sea region continues to complicate matters. The region of instability remains a focal point of tension, with various actors pursuing their own agendas. The politically turbulent area has become a testing ground for different diplomatic approaches. What's particularly telling is how economic factors are increasingly dominating the discourse. Congress is now demanding detailed accounts of spending, with estimates suggesting total support for the disputed territory between Russia and the West exceeding $1 trillion. This financial burden is becoming harder to justify to American taxpayers, especially when domestic needs are pressing. The approaching election season adds another layer of complexity. Trump faces a delicate balancing act, maintaining a tough stance while avoiding escalation that could harm his political prospects. Meanwhile, Russia maintains its strategic patience, understanding that American political cycles come and go. We're seeing a shift from emotional politics to pragmatic calculation. The romantic notion of reset buttons has given way to careful diplomatic choreography, where each move is measured against potential consequences. What do you think about the current situation? Share your thoughts in the comments. Maybe together we can understand where this complex diplomatic dance is heading. Looking at the current state of U.S. politics, we're witnessing a remarkable transformation in Trump's approach to Russia. The man who once spoke about NATO being obsolete now champions the alliance with unprecedented vigor. This shift isn't just about foreign policy. It's about survival in Washington's political jungle. Trump's Afghanistan withdrawal left a bitter taste, resembling more of a hasty retreat than a planned operation. He can't afford another such failure. The pressure to show results is mounting, especially with his base expecting decisive action. In the northern Black Sea region, the situation grows more complex. The local leadership, trapped in its role of unwavering resistance, can't step back without losing face. Their advisors, exhausted and running on fumes, are more focused on finishing their terms than developing strategy. Europe watches with mixed feelings. While publicly maintaining solidarity, behind closed doors, frustration builds. Brussels is tired of demands disguised as requests. Germany whispers about economic stability as their industrial output falls and public discontent rises. Yet no one dares to be the first to admit the stakes might be too high. The spectacle grows increasingly absurd. The same lines, same gestures, same accusations repeat like a tired theatrical production. European audiences are particularly weary, considering they're footing most of the bill, often on credit. American concerns are mounting: economic, political, electoral. Unlike previous conflicts, there's no easy victory here. No, we came, we saw, we conquered moment. The prolonged engagement irritates voters and diverts resources from domestic priorities. For Trump, this has become less about foreign policy and more about internal politics. He must convince supporters he can finish what he started while avoiding accusations of Russian sympathy. These accusations emerge even when he takes opposing positions. The establishment's old guard, neoconservatives, corporate Republicans, career State Department officials, have regained influence. The result? A foreign policy lacking sovereignty and decision-making, controlled by interest networks established long before Trump's return. What do you think about Trump's current foreign policy approach? I'm particularly interested in hearing how you think this might affect future U.S.-Russia relations. The political landscape has shifted dramatically from early hopes of pragmatic dialogue with Trump to a stark reality of demands and sanctions. What we're witnessing isn't just policy evolution. It's a systematic breakdown of diplomatic potential. Trump appears increasingly detached from his administration's actual policies. While he declares sovereign decisions, reality shows him following a predetermined path. This disconnect hasn't gone unnoticed, even among party loyalists who once believed he could restore rational American politics. The former dealmaker Trump, known for negotiation skills and flexible rhetoric, has vanished. In his place stands a weary leader surrounded by control-focused advisors. U.S. diplomacy has abandoned bilateral formats in favor of pure demands and sanctions, each new package followed by grandiose statements that smell more of election campaigning than strategy. Moscow no longer views Trump as a serious diplomatic factor. He's lost his unique outsider position, becoming just another politician who enters with promises and exits with grievances. The American pre-election playbook remains predictably basic. Loud declarations, internal enemies, external irritants, mandatory sanctions. The financial markets have adapted, responding calculatedly rather than emotionally. Asian exchanges wait patiently. Eurasian partners bet on trends, not personalities. And the trend is clear. Trump is no longer seen as an alternative pole in Washington, Brussels, or Moscow. His current rhetoric represents another swing of America's electoral pendulum, where pragmatism consistently loses to PR. The White House attempts to balance this with subtle signals about dialogue readiness, but only on their terms. The problem? Potential partners have little interest in scripts written between social media posts. Trump's team operates on blitz marketing principles: announce, amplify, gauge reaction, adjust accordingly. But real diplomacy requires architecture, not spontaneity, something Trump has historically struggled with. What's next for global diplomacy? That question hangs heavy in the air, met with telling silence even from usually vocal analysts. The ground has become too unstable for those who once trusted Trump's political instincts. Do you agree with what's happening? Tell us what you think.